My name is Rose Waltz. I love fighting games, I love Gundam, and I'm terrible at the Gundam fighting game. That there is the premise of this whole video. I wanted an excuse to talk about my favorite fighting game of all time, Gundam Extreme vs. Maxi Boost On. And before we get too into it, no, it's not a traditional fighting game, it's an arena fighter, and specifically a 2v2 focused arena fighter. Everything's balanced around the fact that you have a partner, so it doesn't really, play like Tekken or Street Fighter, but nonetheless, it was in that Core A Gaming video about the different types of fighting games, so it's a fighting game and I'm gonna talk about it. So first off, like I said, it's not a traditional fighter, so let's go into what exactly Gundam Extreme Versus is. First of all, it's an incredibly fucking popular arcade game in Japan, obscenely popular, and unfortunately, we do not really get very many releases in the West. Currently, everyone plays, I believe, a almost decade-old version of the game called Gundam Extreme vs. Maxi Boost On. We play it on the PlayStation 4, and the matchmaking is dead as hell, so we play it in player lobby rooms. Thankfully, there's always at least one open most of the time, and if there's not, you can open one up and people will join quickly enough. It's not completely dead, you can still find matches, and there's a ton of single-player CPU arcade modes, which a bit of footage will be playing on the screen of that now, so don't worry too much. It is still a not super active fighting game, but it's still well worth the money, and maybe I'm shilling it a little bit because if enough people buy Gundam Extreme vs. Maxi Boost On, they'll actually go ahead and port Gundam Extreme vs. Overboost, which is the newest one, over to the States, and I think that would be pretty cool. So yes, this video has a little bit of an agenda, but bear with me, bear with me. So, this is a 2v2 arena fighter. If you've never played an arena fighter before, probably the most popular ones are maybe Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm, or if you ever played Virtual On back in the day, that would be another really solid arena fighter. However, this is not a genre that has too many very competitive or good entries, so us Gundam fans make do. Luckily, however, for us Gundam fans, Gundam Extreme Versus is incredibly fucking good and polished. There are a lot of systems in this game that add to the complexity to make it a lot of fun. First of all, like I mentioned, it's a 2v2 game. Almost primarily. You can play it 1v1, but it's not really recommended. The suits aren't balanced for 1v1. In any case, the way the game works is you and your partner team up to beat you and your opponent's partner. Everyone has a certain amount of points. I believe the default is like 6,000 maybe. I don't actually know because the points change a little bit between games. My first entry was Gundam Versus, which is very different. But in any case, a lot of the really popular, really strong mobile suits, think stuff like Gundam Epion, Burning Gundam, Barbados Lupus Rex. All of those big name suits, big name, strong, powerful suits will be the highest costed suits. So within that 6,000 cost that you have, your super high-end suits cost 3,000, which is half of that life total. Then eventually you have different tiers, like 2,500, which has stuff like Banshee Norn, or a lesser version of Gundam Barbados. And then you have like 2,000s, which I really enjoy playing, which are like the F91s. And then you have 1,500s, which are like niche mobile suits and grunt suits. And the way it works generally is you just fight until you die. And so the weaker suits can technically have more lives, but they don't do as much damage, their moves aren't as good, etc., etc. The game itself is a 3-button game, which I really enjoy. Not a lot to keep track of. Well, technically 4 buttons if you count switch targets, but action-wise you only get 3 buttons. You get your boost, which is for, well, boosting and jumping. You get your melee, or triangle. It's not always melee depending on the suit, but for ease of access I will be calling it melee. And then you have your shooting, which is just your square button. Pretty traditional stuff. However, when you combine those buttons, you can do shooting plus boost, shooting plus melee, melee plus boost. All of these will give you different abilities depending on your mobile suit. Oftentimes doing melee plus boost will do like a mobility move, whereas like melee plus shooting will do like a stronger shooting like a rocket launcher, etc., etc. And there are hundreds of mobile suits, so there are a lot of variations on this formula, and thankfully, probably your favorite mobile suit is in this game. It has been around for decades. They have a ton of mobile suits in here, and so it's very, very fun for every Gundam fan. Beyond that, you also have your 8 directional movement. However, if you double tap it, you get a dash. The dash is super important, the dash cuts tracking, etc, etc. It'll also be used in some both defensive and offensive ways that I'll talk about later. You also have pressing back to forward, which activates your guard, which, well, it guards at the cost of some of your boost meter. And then you also have, wait, is that everything? I talked about dashing, jumping, guarding, boosting, shooting, meleeing. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole gamut. Oh! That's what I was going to talk about. Some mobile suits have a mobile armor mode, which is if you're holding boost and you dash during it, you can transform or hop on like a mobility thing. Think Zeta Gundam or Hyakushiki's little wave rider thing, or transforming mobile suits like the Gundam Wing, for example. So, now that we have all the super base systems, we can start getting more into the nitty-gritty about this game. First of all, I guess the easiest thing to talk about first would be melee combos. Melee combos are directional. Think DMC2 if it was good. So for example, just like a traditional fighting game, you'll have, we use numpad notation here, by the way, you'll have something like 2C, which is hold back and press boost, or you'll have something like 8A, which is hold forward and press your shooting, or 8B, hold forward, pressure melee, etc, etc. Most of the time, the only thing that matters about this is if you're calling in an assist, which some mobile suits have assists. Gundam Versus had global assists, but Gundam Versus was not very well received. So, sometimes, depending on the direction that you're pressing, different moves will come out. So for example, when you're calling an assist, if you hold like neutral, forward, or back, you'll get a shooting assist, whereas if you're holding left or right, you will get a melee assist from the same mobile suit. There are more specific ones. Wing Zero Endless Waltz, your Tall Geese assist will either call a triple barrage of beam shooting or a Jirobi, which is just like, Jirobi's like the classic big long beam, and I won't get too into the terminology because there's a lot of terminology in these Gundam Versus games. You have like Fuwa stepping, rainbow canceling, Pionkaku, and even more traditional fighting game terminology like Okizeme. In any case, there's a lot to go through, and I won't be covering all of it. So, back on the idea of directional attacks. These also take place in your melee combos. Most melee focus units, and even a lot of non-melee focus units, will have different melee attacks depending on which direction you are like pressing during your attack. So for example, a lot of units will have like 4 or 6 Bs, which kind of do a wraparound. Some units on their 2 Bs will have Pionkakus, which is when you jump in the air and it breaks tracking and it makes it really difficult for you to keep track of. Think of it like a helm splitter kind of a thing. Some mobile suits like the Burning Gundam have really weird stuff where it's like if you press 5A, 5A, 5B, 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 2B, and then you boost and then you spam B, you'll get a very special move called Aerial Rave, which is really sick to do. But in any case, there's a lot of really cool, interesting mechanics with this, and unlike Devil May Cry 2, the directional attacks make a lot of sense during the gameplay in this. It just feels pretty natural for the most part. So there's the most basicest overview I could possibly give. So let's go into why I'm god-awful at this game. First of all, unlike traditional fighters, where I can kind of understand stuff like frame data and when I can take my turn, that isn't really the case in this 2v2 arena fighter. A lot of the game is based around really, really slick teamwork and being able to actually tag your opponent when you need to. Now, what I mean by that is oftentimes when you're boosting or stepping, ranged attacks won't hit you anymore. So one of the most basic things ever to do is to catch someone as they're landing. You can't boost around forever, and the way you recover boost is by landing, and depending on how much boost you use is how long it takes for you to recover it upon landing. So, the easiest way to hit people is when you see them landing, you shoot them. And then you can do stuff like canceling your shots to get an easy 3-hit knockdown, which is like a super basic offensive technique. In any way, even though these ideas make sense to me, actually executing them in-game is really, really hard. You have another opponent that's always ready to cut for their teammate, which cutting is when you will interrupt an enemy's attack on your partner by hitting them, and oftentimes that hits them out of their combo or even gets a knockdown where you can set up Okizeme. Speaking of knockdowns, a lot of the game is based around knockdowns. Think of it as a game of a lot of very, very small advantageous positions that you are trying to get to. So for example, say you do manage to knock somebody down with your 3-hit beam cancel offensive combo. They are now down for a very short amount of time, but during that time, you are now in a 2v1 against the opponent. You have to press that advantage as fast as you can. However, you also have to be careful of friendly fire. Granted, friendly fire is scaled, but it will always knock your teammate out of whatever attack they're doing, much like when an opponent cuts for their partner. So, you can't just always dogpile on the other opponent, or you'll just hit each other out of your combos and do super scaled damage. So it becomes like this pseudo 2 1v1s that turn into 2v1s whenever someone wins one of their 1v1s, but also it's not like a full 2v1 because you can't do full damage on everybody, but the ideal position is you just transfer that 2v1 position into another knockdown, which gives you another 2v1 position into a knockdown, etc, etc. The game doesn't always flow that way though, and beyond that, boost management is incredibly difficult and definitely where I have the hardest time. Managing your boost and not over boosting is really tough. A problem I have is when I see someone landing, I will often try to do my super easy offensive 3-hit combo. The problem is, if they recover in time, if they didn't use like full boost to get overcharged or overheated, which takes the longest amount of time to recover, I will often miss. And then I'm out of boost because I used it all using an offensive technique. And if their partner is ready for that, they can then knock me down, and I put my partner in a super disadvantageous position. Sorry, I had to run that word again. It's a hard word to say. In any case, not only is it a 2v2, it almost feels like every mistake you make is amplified by 1,000, because every small mistake leads into a huge advantage for the enemy team and puts your partner in a really tough spot. And this is honestly where I struggle with this game. My boost management is terrible, and I spend a lot of time knocked down. I'm decent at other things. My melee combos are pretty okay. My rainbow canceling is pretty good, which rainbow canceling is when you are doing a melee attack at somebody, you can then do a dash cancel. This will cancel your melee attack and send you in a small arc around the opponent that you're targeting. However, when you're in close range, or when you cancel it from a melee attack, this gives you a rainbow dash. You just get a little rainbow color. And oftentimes these melee things will turn into what is called rainbow dances, which is when both opponents are rainbow dashing so much until they manage to actually get the first hit, and it heavily favors high-costed suits that have higher boost reserves. In any case, I'm pretty decent at the melee and rainbow dashing stuff. Problem there, melee is generally not very good in this game. Not that it's entirely useless, it's really good in those 2v1 scenarios I talked about where you do have a guaranteed full melee combo. In neutral, however, it's incredibly difficult to get in. With all of these dash cancels also affecting projectile attacks, opponents can often just course correct, and you'll spend so much boost actually trying to get close to them that it's really hard to run a full melee focused identity in these games. Which is, of course, kind of my Achilles heel, since my projectile game is not very good between the poor boost management and inability to actually hit things a lot of the time. In any case, even though I don't understand neutral in this game at all, even though the game flow still evades me, even though I'm not very good at playing in a 2v2 game with my partner, I fucking adore this game. I think it's so much fun. The mobile suits are so cool. There's so much care put into all of the individual combos that are references from obscure manga or anime attacks that they only used once. For example, one of Burning Gundam's best moves is Neutral 2B, which will summon a bunch of clones, which he only used in one fight against Jiminy Crockett in the second season, or second half of G Gundam. In any case, there's a lot of charm put into these mobile suits, and one of my all-time favorite things is watching an Epion combo where you just spam triangle and square because it's optimal and very fast. And it looks goofy, but it's fun at the very least, and that's something I love about this game, is it's incredibly fun. Even though I'm not very good at the online, it's still a blast to hop in and try my best, and when I do get a win, it feels really, really good. It feels cool every time you get a win. You feel like you piloted a mobile suit. It's honestly incredible, and one of my, probably actually my favorite Gundam game of all time is Gundam Extreme Versus. Granted, I'm biased, I'm a fighting game player, but still, this is like a Gundam game with a huge roster of both big name and niche mobile suits. There's very specific move sets that were put in to pay homage to all of the different things that these mobile suits come from and the different moves that they've done, and it's not just like generic. It feels very Gundam, and that's what makes it my favorite Gundam game. In any case, if you've ever wanted to try out an arena fighter and you like cool robots and you like the idea of piloting cool robots, Gundam Extreme vs. Maxi Boost On is probably the game for you, at least to try out. It goes on sale generally frequently on the PS4 store, and you can also play it on PS5. It's the PS4 version, but it's like, I don't even know if it's like upscaled to PS5 or if it just lets you play on it. In any case, it's a ton of fun, and if you don't end up liking the other players, or if you're not finding any matches online for whatever reason, the offline modes are a ton of fun too. There's traditional arcade mode like branching path battles, and there's also Maxi Boost missions, which is like this huge grid of really cool missions that are all themed around either specific fights from the franchise or specific series from the franchise, or even just like specific vibes from the franchise. There's like this one fight where you fight a bunch of melee focused suits, so you fight like the Gauf from 8th Mobile Suit Team, and then you fight Nobel Gundam, and then you fight the Gauf Ignited, or people are gonna get mad at me because I said Gauf and not Goof. In any case, it's just a really cool, there's tons of stuff for you to do even if you're not an online player, and granted, while you won't get that like 2v2 competitive stuff that the game was built around, it is still a ton of fun to try to S-rank all those missions and fight cool stuff like the Big Zam and whatnot. So yeah, this is my favorite fighting game. I'm straight ass at it, like actually goddamn terrible, and I love it so much.